Harp's House. In your eardrum. Speaker box. Man, wherever you want me to be.
You're now listening
to Harp's House. Thanks everybody for listening to Harp's House. Once again, I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and we're doing a special edition of a UFC breakdown. I've got my good friend Stan Tucker. Now, he's a fight expert. He's been watching boxing since 1989. He's been watching UFC since 1995. So my man knows his stuff. Now, Stanley, let's come straight out the gate with your fight of the night.
My fight of the night would have to be Mike Perry versus Alan Jouban.
All right. And give me the goods. Why do you think that was the fight of the night?
Because, the old mantra is that styles make fights, and I thought that this was an interesting matchup. On one side you had the super heavy-handed Mike Perry, who notoriously puts out his opponents usually in the first round, against a rangier, more technically sound fighter that doesn't have as heavy hands or feet, but is a little bit more well-rounded in Alan Jouban. So out of the gate, I knew that Perry was going to put a lot of pressure on him trying to land the big shot. And if Alan Jouban was able to survive the first round, that he would be able to gain the advantage. So I don't know if you remember, but he had taken a 360 backhand fist attempt at Mike Perry, where Mike Perry caught him in the back of the head, and then Jouban kind of staggered. So at that point, I thought that Perry was going to put him out like he put a lot of his other opponents out. But Jouban more or less weathered the storm, arguably stole that first round, and then from the second round to the end of the fight, was able to do a lot of damage on Perry's lead leg. And so since Perry's an explosive fighter who wants to come in heavy with the hands, the leg kick is kind of the new jab.
It is. I noticed that, yeah, to keep your distance, yeah.
So he was able to control the pace of the fight and the distance of the fight, and he had Mike Perry very, very hampered in trying to be explosive. So once you launch a few leg kicks to the back of the lead leg, then the person can't get the same boost when they're trying to explode and land a left hook or a straight right. So Jouban knew what he was doing. He was more or less picking Perry apart, and by the end of the fight, Perry was extremely discouraged. So the styles I thought that the styles made that one very interesting, and just kind of seeing how quickly the tide turned and how skillful Jouban had to be to keep Perry out of his face.
That's interesting you said that, and I was some of the pre-fight specials that they have leading up to the fight. I saw that even Joe Rogan said it himself that Perry kind of comes across as like this kind of a jerk, but he, like you said, he does have those savage hands. He yells a lot. He's real brash. They showed some of his pre-fight routines at the weigh-ins where he'd like fake shake your hand and he'd yell in your face, and he had 9 KOs coming into that fight. So it was interesting to see if Jouban could, like you said, stay away from that overhand right. And he was able to, like you said, with the leg kicks and also just the straight jab, keeping his distance to kind of stay away from that hand as if you were fighting somebody like a Rumble, because they have so much power in their hands. Yeah,
definitely. And Perry likes to intimidate his opponents, as you pointed out. And so in the beginning of the fight, Perry probably thought that Jouban was going to be overwhelmed by the pressure, but Jouban did everything that a technical fighter is supposed to do. And one thing that I did notice that Perry's lacking in his arsenal, which is extremely helpful for power punches in particular, is to be able to cut the ring off.
Right.
As opposed to, Perry seems to be following Jouban around the ring, as opposed to
cutting it off,
taking the angle. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And even in the second round, like you said, Jouban had a nice straight right and knocked Perry right on his wallet, and that probably won him the round late. But like you said, it seemed like Perry just really couldn't get in sync because, like you said, Jouban had such a good plan coming in, and he even said it the night before to the UFC reporter. He was saying he didn't like how Mike Perry was real disrespectful, and he's going to show him like how a true martial artist performs in the ring. He was real technical, and like you said, he pretty much did exactly what he had to do. And like you said, it looked like he kept sneaking the round. He kept Perry off balance with his attack.
Yeah, Perry was definitely unable to develop a rhythm.
Absolutely. And then, all right, so let's go kind of fight by fight. Leslie Smith versus Aldana in the first fight. Now, it was a great fight. I watched that from start to finish, and both fighters are pretty new to the UFC. They both fought in Invicta before. Smith knocked out Aldana's ponytail early in the first round, so it was a great fight to get the live card started. So I'm sure fans were excited about that one. What were your thoughts on that one?
I thought that Leslie Smith, it was a very explosive fight. So many punches thrown. So just the total strikes had to have been incredible. But it does seem like Leslie Smith probably doubled Aldana's output. So it was tough to see who had the heavier hands. Sometimes I think that us as fans, we go into the fights under the assumption that one person has the power punch advantage over the other. But in this case, I think that it was more or less even, but it just seemed like Leslie Smith was throwing such a high volume to where if they have the same power, you've got to give the edge to the person who's just a lot busier.
And it looked like Smith. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Continue.
Oh, no, I was going to say it looked like Smith almost didn't respect her punching power as well. Like, she looked the part, but she wasn't really packing that power behind her hands. And I think Smith started to realize that as the fight kind of progressed. And like you said, she kept stalking her and bringing the fight into her. That's kind of how it came across to me.
Yeah, she walked her down, and she didn't respect. I don't think she respected her power. I don't think that she felt that at any given time, Aldana was going to open up to the point where Smith would be in jeopardy of losing the fight. So I think that once you feel that comfortable against your opponent, you can more or less throw caution to the wind. Keep on applying the pressure because you're, as we pointed out, you're not fighting somebody who could just turn the fight around with one strike.
Right. So, yeah, Smith ended up winning that one by a small amount, in my opinion, but she did end up winning after 3 rounds. And then we'll move on to Josh Emmett. He was 10-0 going into the fight. He beat Scott Holtzman, who was 9-1. What was your thoughts on that fight?
I thought that one was actually I thought it was pretty even from the outset, but I think that the difference was the takedowns and Josh Emmett controlling more of the ground activity.
Absolutely.
So I think that the judges give a lot of points and credence when people are trying to go for like an arm bar attempt, or they move from half mount and get into side control, or they go from the guard position to then somehow taking side control. So sometimes, even if there's not a whole lot of damage being done, just the activity, once you are in the dominant position and you've taken somebody down, I think that usually scores you a lot of points with the judges. So I think that Emmett had a slight advantage with the strikes, but was more or less dominant with the takedowns. And
yeah, that's some of the takedowns that's some of the notes that I wrote down. He looked like he was more dominant, like you said, in all their exchanges, and he looked like he was just a stronger fighter in terms of like his core and his back. He looked more physically imposing, and I think that definitely helped him out. And like you said, it seemed like it almost took Holtzman, he couldn't get his rhythm as well, and like you said, Holtzman was able to get back on his feet, but then Emmett would take him down again. It was just like he was imposing his will on Holtzman throughout the fight when I looked at it.
Yeah, and if somebody was going to go into the sport green, or if they were to say, okay, what discipline should I pick up if I'm going to enter the sport? To me, the answer is not even a tough choice. To me, it seems like wrestling can guarantee that in what I would consider to be slow rounds, meaning that there's not a whole lot of just change the tide type of punches being thrown, that usually the wrestler is just going to smother the other fighter, and sometimes you can rack up 45 seconds, a minute and a half, 3 minutes of a round, just by being the better wrestler and keeping the other person off rhythm. So if the striker went into the fight with a game plan and you take him down 15 seconds, 20 seconds into the fight, you might have just banked an entire round just by being a superior wrestler to the striker.
Absolutely. And Joe Rogan says that a lot when people are wrestling and grappling and just like that dirty boxing and just like somebody laying on you and imposing their will. It just takes a lot out of you, and your game plan flies out the window. You stop hearing your corner on the shouting out what to do, because it's so physically taxing to fight a wrestler, because like you said, wrestlers are just used to that physical grind out. And a lot of people will tell you like there's nothing like wrestling, because it's just so physically taxing on people, especially if you're a striker and you want to just stay on your feet and pick your opponent apart. But now you're just getting worn down on the ground. It just completely changes your game plan totally.
Yeah, big time. And even if even if you're going against an explosive opponent, if you've been if you have had his back for say a lot of the first round, and you've been trying to sweep the leg, shoot a single, double leg, and you've just really been going to work, trying to either ground and pound or just really make the striker work throughout the first round. Please believe by the second round, third round, that striker is not going to be packing the same punch because of how exhausted they were in the first round.
Exactly. And their legs are going to be they're going to be quicker to get out of the way when you're trying to shoot, because like you said, it's just so much more evident that, man, like I don't want to get taken down again, because you remember how you're basically exhausted from that first round or that second round. So it just changes up the whole dynamic of the fight. Like you said, when you're fighting a wrestler who just likes to grind and just make it just a nasty, gritty fight.
Yeah, and it keeps you off balance, because now you're so worried about the takedown that it starts to open up the playbook for the wrestler, who can then even work in a jab and a couple, in combinations, because at a certain point you'd rather eat the jab than to have him take your legs again.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, most spectators at home would love to see like you said, just a striking match with kicks, knees, elbows, and punches. But like you said, if you're wanting to get into the sport, your first discipline for sure is wrestling, because you might not win a fight on your feet, but you probably won't get knocked out if you can take it down to the ground. And like you said, that's what you kind of like you grow from wrestling. Because a lot of the fighters, like you said, if you look over the history, a lot of the fighters who have had the most success have come from a wrestling background, and then you learn hands and striking versus starting on your feet, because a lot of those guys are like turtles when they go on the ground until they really grind it out and get some wrestling background, or like you said, some jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's almost like, for instance, if somebody has never thrown a football, even if they're a really good athlete, or better yet, let's say baseball, swinging a bat, throwing a baseball, you could tell if somebody played Little League, because even if the person's an extremely good athlete, if they haven't had the practice of just going through the motion of properly throwing a baseball like a baseball's supposed to be thrown, then they're going to look awkward throwing the baseball, right?
Right.
So wrestling, even if the person has been trying to learn how to wrestle, if it's not in their DNA and if they haven't had enough experience wrestling, they can quickly get exposed, and it's easily evident, because they just don't look like they know what they're doing once they're in wrestling circumstances.
Especially if they're fighting, like you said, someone who comes from a wrestling background. It's just, and how they switch to and from transitions, and like they get your back, or they get just all sorts of like you said, holds and submissions. It's crazy watching, like you said, just some of the most dominant strikers on the ground versus some of the most dominant wrestlers. It's almost unfair. And it's funny because Dana hates when wrestlers get in there and grind it out and just make it like a gritty, ugly, battle it out, just war on the ground. And most spectators in the crowd, they start booing once it becomes like two men laying on each other and jockeying for position, and like one holding the wrist. It's ugly to watch. But like you said, if you want to learn how to really get into the sport and basically not get knocked out, that's the best thing to start with, in my opinion, as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, they used to not even stand them up. You could go, before they were doing, the 5-minute rounds and breaking the fight up into that, Big John McCarthy sometimes would just be standing there, and they could be on the ground in a very uneventful position for like a half an hour, and the fight just goes the entire time.
Right.
The guys laying around on the knee. It was actually a really controversial thing when they started to include All right, stand him
up. Yeah,
guys.
stand up. Gotta work. Yeah. I prefer that. It makes it more enjoyable for the viewer. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about putting a good product out there, not just like the core of the sport in terms of the wrestling heads. Because like you said, you're trying to pull in as many viewers as you can, not just wrestling purists. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's purity versus entertainment.
Right. But let's take a break. We're going to step away for a second. We're going to come back with Urijah Faber versus Brad Pickett. Urijah Faber's last fight in the octagon. So he says. We'll be right back. And we're back. Harp's House. You know what it is. harpshouse.com. Thanks for sticking around for this special UFC post-fight interview. We're going to pick it right back up with Urijah Faber versus Brad Pickett. Now, this is Urijah Faber, according to him. This was his last fight in the octagon. He says he can remember fighting many years ago for $200 at an Indian casino. And so the California kid has come a long way, coming into the ring, listening to Dr. Dre and Snoop and California Love with Tupac. So what were your thoughts on Urijah's last fight in the octagon?
He looked extremely agile. He looked extremely coordinated, super active. I mean, to be honest, he looked 10 years younger.
Right. Compared to the last fight with Dominick, he looked like a totally different fighter.
Different fighter, but then again, he was also fighting a different opponent, right?
Absolutely.
So sometimes an outstanding opponent can make a good fighter look mediocre, and sometimes if you're a great fighter, sometimes if you're a good fighter, you would make a great fighter look even better than a great fighter because he's superior. So I just thought that there was a whole bunch of bounce in Faber's step, and he does what I would call like mosquito larva movement. It's almost like a wasp, right? You see it the way that a wasp hovers in one spot, then in a millisecond, boom, it's in another spot, stays there for a little bit, then boom, and it just jumped again, and you just didn't even see it. So Faber looked like he was exhibiting that type of foot speed again, which I hadn't seen in a while. Right,
and like you said, I don't think Pickett was able to get his timing down. It looked like he was trying to get Urijah's timing down, but he couldn't because, like you said, that in and out. The commentator was saying he was trying to get some of those counter moves, but he wasn't able to even get his counters off because Urijah was in and he was out. Even in the slow motion recap in between rounds, you were seeing that he wouldn't even come out. He couldn't even strike Urijah once Urijah was doing his damage. And like you said, Urijah was kind of imposing his will. He kept taking him down to the ground like that dirty, gritty wrestling. And Brad Pickett didn't want to get to the ground. He wanted to stay on his feet because that's his nickname. One punch, something like that. He wanted to just knock you out instead of get on the ground and then have to deal with that.
Oh, yeah. It seemed like Brad Pickett had little more than just a puncher's chance in that one. And, with Faber, they'll say, finish your breakfast, right? Finish your plate, finish your dinner. So it's like you jump in, you launch the combination, but then you're supposed to be out for dessert. You're not supposed to stick around the table, until dessert.
Gotcha.
When you're fighting a one-punch knockout fighter like Brad Pickett. So, yeah, Faber was really all over him, making it a really uncomfortable, miserable fight for Pickett. However, there was one thing that I thought that Pickett could have applied that could have, I don't know if it could have won him the fight, but it looked like it was the one thing that he was able to do effectively.
Those low kicks?
Yes.
The low kicks to the calf. Yeah. And if you remember, way back in the day, remember Urijah fought Jose, and Jose almost kicked his leg off his body?
Oh, he tortured him.
It was horrible. I think so. They had a YouTube video on it. Somebody counted 60 leg kicks or some unreal amount. Wasn't Urijah on crutches and he showed his leg the next day and it was a big balloon. It was crazy how swollen his leg was.
Oh, it was purple, it was blue, and it was bruised. It was elevated where you could actually see the skin really just kind of puffing out in that whole region where Aldo was going to work. And it just seemed like with the few calf kicks that Pickett was able to land, that they just seemed extremely effective. It seemed like anytime he landed it, you would see Faber do this kind of uncomfortable, like, little boxer hop, like, where he was saying, "Okay, we don't want to get hit by that again."
Right. And that's why he started going to the ground more. He was like, all right, none of this standing stuff. Let's go to the ground because I know you're not comfortable there. And Brian Stan was saying that in the play-by-play. He was like, look, he's having a lot of success with that calf kick. And even when they brought in some of the guys from upstairs to give their thoughts on it, on how Pickett should go about kind of picking apart Saber, they were saying he better continue with those leg kicks. But I think it just wasn't his night because Urijah had the entire stadium, or not the stadium, but the entire arena around him. And like you said, he wanted to go out on top and nobody was going to beat him unless you just had like bricks and you caught him. And he just wouldn't, like you said, he wouldn't allow himself to get knocked out last night.
Yeah. And it seemed like aside from those calf kicks, when it came to the just exchanging hands in the boxing, it just seemed like Faber was just moving way too well for Pickett to keep up. So even if Pickett wanted to deliver the knockout punch, he was taking a lot. He was receiving a lot of incoming fire in the meantime. So then it becomes, well, what would you rather? Do you just want to kind of survive on your feet and let this clock expire, or do you want to try to press the issue, get hit more often, and then get taken down and grounded and pounded? So it just didn't seem like there was a really good option on the table for Pickett.
Right. And like you said, Faber's tempo and his in and outs just wouldn't allow him to get his timing down. So like you said, Faber for sure dictated the fight from the beginning to the end. And like you said, he just looked like somebody who just wouldn't be denied. And I wonder, like you said, if there was one or two more rounds, if for some reason they had to go 5 rounds because it was Faber's last fight, would those calf kicks have made a difference? I don't think Pickett really committed to it like he should have, though, because like you said, I remember one fight I saw, oh my goodness, I can't think of the fighter's name, but he was getting kicked so much in his front leg, like he couldn't even really stand up. He started hopping. I think it was Rampage. He fought somebody back in the day, and he was getting kicked so much he couldn't even like stand, and that was pretty much the end of the fight because he had no 2 legs to stand on. So. Yeah,
I do vaguely remember. I'm trying to think who that fight might have been against. Another one I could think of was one of Edson Barbosa.
He's a monster.
One of his fights.
Yeah, it's like a baseball bat when he's those leg kicks.
Oh, he swings that. Yeah, he swings that, and it's and you can hear it, and it's like a slap, but it's a slap with the echo, and so you can only imagine what that feels like.
Right. The last fight, didn't he fight Melendez, and he put a beating on him with his leg kicks, didn't he? Wasn't that his last fight in the octagon?
Barbosa's last fight?
I believe it was, yeah.
Let me.
I'll look it up. But, so yeah, aside from the Urijah Faber fight, the next fight was the co-main event with Sage Northcutt and Mickey Gall. What was your thoughts on that fight? There was a lot of anticipation going into that fight because Mickey Gall called out Sage Northcutt when he fought in his last fight, and I guess Sage didn't appreciate that. Mickey Gall went back and forth saying that Sage was a poser, he was fake, he was phony, and he wanted to, I guess, knock the spikes out of his hair. So what did you think about that fight?
So Sage Northcutt is a very young fighter. He's only 20 years old. Think
right.
about that.
I think he's the youngest guy on the card, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. So Northcutt, had a lot of success. I know he ran into Brian Barberena, lost to him via submission a couple fights ago. But he usually comes in with really a really well-rounded game, good hands, and then you've got Mickey Gall, who I wouldn't have picked him. I wouldn't have guessed that Mickey Gall would win, but I probably should have because Mickey Gall is a jiu-jitsu practitioner and a wrestler. But Sage Northcutt isn't CM Punk, right? So right. Mickey Gall dominated CM Punk in about a minute, got him out of there. But I thought that there was a chance that the hand disparity, the boxing striking disparity between Northcutt and Gall might have been too much to where Gall would have never had the opportunity to really take Northcutt down. So Northcutt did land some effective punches in the first round. He did press the issue. I thought that the first round was pretty difficult to call. I thought it was pretty even because they were both winning in different aspects of the fight. But when Gall finally dropped Northcutt, well, there was a couple moments before that where he caught Northcutt with a couple shots.
Right.
But Northcutt was still taunting him, pressing the issue, talking a lot of trash in the fight. So I was thinking, well, it doesn't seem like Mickey Gall could really hurt Northcutt.
Right.
So it looks like Northcutt might just walk him down and punish him.
And I think like two times early on in the fight, Northcutt was like he was kicking Gall when he was down on the ground. He was talking trash to him. I think he kind of felt played because Gall was disrespecting him, calling him fake and this and that. But like you said, it all turned so quickly.
Very quickly, and it wasn't too long after that when Mickey Gall finished that fight. And
Right.
It looked like once Northcutt had gotten dropped, and then Mickey Gall took his back. It looked like Northcutt was almost happy to tap out.
Right.
Because he was only going to get punished from that point on. But remember when Gall was laying on his back and Northcutt was daring him to get up, but Gall was kind of just hanging out on his back for a little bit more.
Right.
He wasn't really in a hurry to get up.
Right.
I thought that maybe he was more hurt than he was leading on. I thought that maybe when Northcutt dropped him, that his legs weren't quite right yet, so he was going to try to milk all the time that he could while on his back. So I was thinking, well, if he's buzzed this early, then it's only going to be a matter of time before he gets dropped again. But as fate would have it, he eventually was the one who put Northcutt on his butt and then finished him soon after. So, if it wasn't for that, for the Joban versus Perry fight, I would say that from a matchup standpoint, that's probably the fight that I was looking forward to the most.
Right. And I thought Gall really wanted to take the fight to the ground. That's why he kept laying down on the ground and like kind of trying to, I guess you would say, pull Northcutt in because he knew his advantage was on the ground. And like he said in the post-fight interview in the ring, he was saying that, my jiu-jitsu was on point, and I wanted to take the fight to the ground. And if you notice, like you said, when he took him down, he didn't even go for the ground and pound. He immediately switched position and went to the back for the rear naked choke. So he didn't even really go for the ground and pound. He just wanted to choke him out.
Yeah, so that's another thing. When you have that type of an instinct, because it is very tempting to just want to jump into the pile and
punch yourself out.
Punishment.
Yeah,
exactly. But he for somebody who's only had about 4 professional fights, to make that decision and say, okay, I could go this way, but no, let's go ahead and take his back and apply a hold. I mean, that showed experience beyond what 4 fights would indicate. So it kind of makes you wonder what type of potential Mickey Gall might have in the division. But I mean, it's really a pretty rough division to
crack at the top. Absolutely. Yeah. And then after that, of course, we had our other co-main event, which was Paige Van Zandt and Michelle Waterson. What were your thoughts going into that fight versus the outcome?
Going into the fight, I was thinking, okay, well, this is a fight night, and fight nights are, they're just outstanding for the sport because it just gives people with regular cable, or in this case, just Fox 11, a chance to see some of the new talent in the UFC. So, Paige Van Zandt, I'm not exactly reinventing the wheel in saying this, but her looks.
She looks the part.
Coupled with her talent,
right?
She looks the part. She looks like a star. She looks like somebody who could spend a lot of time on TV and people would watch.
Right.
So, going into this fight, I thought that her track record didn't necessarily merit headliner status.
She's Brock Osweiler.
Exactly. She might have taken on too much too early, and she seems like an outstanding athlete.
Right.
I don't know how much punishment she's taken in her young career. Also, a very, very young fighter.
Right.
So I think that this was just a case of a bad matchup. It's one of those things where if somebody's an emerging, I'll just juxtapose to use boxing as an example. If somebody is going through the ranks at 20, 21, 22, you really want to navigate their career in a way where you don't throw them in with somebody who's going to really jeopardize that development by knocking them out in the second round or just really, really making them look bad while you're still trying to incubate a star. So with Paige Van Zandt, it just sounds like this just appeared to be a really bad matchup at the end of the day, where maybe some more time in ascending the ranks and fighting some lesser tiered fighters, but also providing enough entertainment before Dana White and the organization put her on the top of a bill, and with that comes all the pressure in being a headliner. So not only do you have to win, but you're also in the back of your mind thinking, I have to give a show.
And this is her second headline. Like you said, this is her second headline. The last fight I can remember, this isn't her last fight, but the last time I remember her losing was against Rose Namajunas, and she also didn't look good when she went to the ground. So like you said, Paige looks the part when she's on her feet, and she's able to, like you said, she's able to kind of get those free-flowing strikes. She's able to get those like jumping leg kicks like she did the last time with that Karate Kid action. But then when you take her to the ground, it's a totally different beast. It's a totally different animal. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier. When you really take somebody to the ground, it's like you really got to really be comfortable getting into those waters, because that's just like it's almost like a battle of wills when you're on the ground.
Yeah, battle of wills, and you're also your body's kind of being used against you. So so if you're trying to push your way out of a grapple, that person is going to use your strength in pushing and find a way to take advantage of that. So you almost feel like you're damned if you do and if you don't. So a lot of times, just having enough instinct to be able to survive on the ground to get you by, but you have to at least have that. You can't be a fish out of water on the ground, or else you just can't survive in this sport. So I mean that's something Van Zandt is obviously going to have to work on, and she said that much over in the post-fight interview. She obviously looked very disappointed, but she also looked very optimistic in terms of what the future in the sport holds. So right. She wasn't second guessing. She wasn't second guessing whether or not she wants to keep on pursuing this, keep on improving her game. She openly said, "Okay, jiu-jitsu. This is something that I'm going to have to work on because it's not the first time I've been choked out." So it seems like even though she's a very young fighter, that she at least has the maturity and the respect for the game to know that these are the areas that she's going to have to develop if she wants to contend for a title.
Right, and she didn't lose to a bum. I mean, she lost to Michelle Waterson, who was she's pretty impressive in her own right. And like you said, she looked like she was going to be doing some big things in the UFC, but of course she had that knee injury, which kind of put her out of action for a while. And she was a champion and Invicta, so she's definitely got some special talent. What is it? The Karate Hottie is what they call her. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if the promotion starts to promote Waterson the way it did Paige Van Zandt, because they're both attractive fighters. They're both fun to watch. But I think Waterson is a little bit more well-rounded right now in her career. And like you said, she's a little bit older than Paige. She's 30 years old. So it'll be interesting to see how I guess you would say it'll be interesting, the trajectory of these two fighters going on from this point on.
Yeah, I think Van Zandt, would have to take some sort of a layoff, but not one of those I got beat too badly to be able to fight anytime soon type of layoffs, but more so one of those I should probably hit the reset button on my development and really, really shore up these weaker areas before I get back in there. So I think that in the short term, obviously, Waterson has the brighter immediate future. And like you said, she's also an entertaining, attractive fighter. So in terms of a consolation prize, yeah, the UFC potential darling did not come out with the W, but Waterson isn't a bad backup plan at all. Right,
they might have had a new darling, absolutely. Because right now, I guess she's 14-4, and like you said, the rear naked choke on Paige was definitely a good way to say hello to a lot of fight fans who had forgot about her or really didn't know her in the beginning. but plenty of fight fans knew Paige, and a lot of people who don't even follow the sport of UFC were introduced to Paige on Dancing with the Stars. So I'm sure a lot of people who follow Paige from Dancing with the Stars probably watched her fight last night, so they're going to know who Michelle Waterson is now. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, where her career goes. But we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with the interview with Dominick Cruz that happened during the fight, and we're also going to talk about this new women's featherweight division. So we'll be right back. And we're back for our final segment of Harp's House. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, along with UFC and boxing expert Stan Tucker. Let's pick it up with the interview that everybody heard, but there was a big part that we didn't hear because Cody Garbrandt felt like he was on pay-per-view when he started cursing, and they had to bleep it out. He was being interviewed in between the fight. It was Cody Garbrandt was being interviewed along with Dominick Cruz for their upcoming card on their 207 card. What are your thoughts on that fight and just the bad blood that seems like it kind of came out of nowhere? Cody said he's been wanting to fight Dominick since he was in high school, and Dominick is basically saying, I don't know who this kid is. He's coming out of nowhere. He's being real disrespectful, and I'm going to show him, and I'm going to put him back in his place. So what are your thoughts on watching that interview and some of the antics that have led up to this fight?
So Dominick Cruz hasn't lost a fight since 2007. So when you put that into context, that's 9 years of nothing but winning. So from Cody Garbrandt's standpoint, he's had a lot of early success in the league. He's 10-0 as an MMA fighter, and all of his UFC fights, except for one, has ended in knockout. So he's 25 years old, extremely explosive, and very brash, and obviously very confident in his skills. So he probably looks at Dominick Cruz as somebody who can't finish him, somebody who can't just mow him over and really, really hurt him. So I think that he has every reason to want to call Dominick Cruz out. I just don't necessarily think that he has the track record, and I don't think that he, quite frankly, is deserving of a title shot this early in his career, even though he knocked out Thomas Almeida. I just think that there are a couple other people who should be in line before him. But I guess that's where a lot of the politicking and a lot of the calling out can be beneficial.
Absolutely, because we've both been watching all the UFC numbers and the fight nights for the last couple of years, and it was weird because Cody kind of came out of nowhere. I saw him on one or two cards. He was on like the prelim card, but then he went from that to like the number 5 contender in the world, and he was seeking a title shot. He was trying to start a fight with Dominick in the back. Because Dominick does a lot of the commentating and the post fight and the pre fight breakdown of these fights, and Dominick kind of shrugged him off. But like you said, I think it's almost like Cody kind of took a page out of Conor McGregor's book, where it's like if you knock people out and you're impressive and you're fighting, but you also have to back that up and shoot up the weight class by adding a little extra, which is like the behind the scene antics instead of just fighting. And I think that's helped him because, like you said, he's getting a title shot and he hasn't beat anybody. Like Dominick said, he hasn't beat anybody at the top of the division in his life, but he has a title shot, which is interesting to say the least.
It's interesting, but like you pointed out, it's not unprecedented, and you end up with quite a few disgruntled fighters who feel like they're being leapfrogged by people who are playing stunts, and then getting title shots over them when they might have the stronger body of work. So with Cody Garbrandt, I almost think that this is a win-win situation. If he beats Dominick Cruz, he's a champion, a young champion who then will get any fight that he wants and will probably get paid a lot of money, and he's already an entertaining personality. If he loses, then it's one of those, well, he's still pretty early in his development. We can't say that this is a major setback. He was supposed to lose to this champion. Just give him a little bit more time and he'll be ready. So I don't think that it's too big a risk, but it's an extremely high reward. So I think that he basically hit the lotto with his title shot.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's almost a win-win because Dominick is not notorious for his knockout power, so he's not going to break your face. He might submit you, but he's not going to just punish you because obviously he's not a real big man. Right now he's listed at 135, so it's not like you're shooting up the weight class of a light heavy or a heavyweight where you can actually get hurt. So I think it'll be interesting though because of course Cody has the background in boxing to see if he can actually catch up to Dominick because in that back and forth they were saying Cody was saying he's going to knock Cruz out and then Cruz was like, well, you got to catch me first. And then Cruz actually brought up something that I didn't really know too much about. He questioned Cody's chin because he said, are you going to tell the public about those concussions that you had in the past? And Cody didn't say anything about that. So it'll be interesting to see if Dominick tries to knock him out or does he try to just kind of box him, take him to the ground and kind of that herky-jerky style that TJ Dillashaw called himself adopting, but then he didn't because he got beat. So it'll be interesting to see how Cody does with that in and out, kind of like you used earlier, that wasp kind of mosquito. You can't really catch it, but it's doing enough damage to rack up points in the eyes of the judges. Because it's also a really weird style to try and emulate when you're leading up to a fight.
Yeah, it would also be pretty tough to find a sparring partner.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. Yeah, to find somebody who can simulate that at a good enough level that's actually going to be useful.
Yeah, but you're just not going to find that elsewhere. So Dominick Cruz has to have the heavy edge on this one. But then again, he's only fought 3 times since October in 2011. So it's one of those things where, you think Showtime Pettis gets injured a lot. That's nothing compared to some of the injuries that, Dominick Cruz has had to undergo. And, to be honest, he probably missed out on the most, on the major portion of the prime of his career.
Right. Just
because he's been spending most of the past few years recovering from knee surgeries. So,
right.
Some fighters age at 37, others will age at 39, others will age at 35. But depending on the type of wear and tear on your body, the decline can sometimes be very steep and almost overnight. And if there was a fighter who could just put somebody's lights out and just change the whole tide of the division of the sports division, I think Cody Garbrandt has that type of skill set. So it might only be a puncher's chance that he has, but it might be a better puncher's chance than we're giving it credit for.
True.
Just because. If you include Dominick Cruz's lack of activity over the past few years, that could play a part as well.
Right. I agree. And like you said, in terms of longevity of the career, I could just see Cruz taking less punishment because of his herky-jerky style and his in-and-out style versus, it seems like Cody, like you said, coming from his boxing background, he'll stand there and trade. So it'll be interesting to see these two styles clash because, like you said, they're very different. In terms of technique. And then that's also going to be the card that Ronda Rousey makes her long-awaited UFC return. What do you think she's going to do against Amanda Nunes?
Lose.
Yeah, I can't. I don't see it ending well for Ronda either.
You know what? I hate to be the person to count her out because I think that she is super strong-willed. I think that she's a super hard worker. I think that she's done a lot of great for the sport. And let's be honest. She pretty much dominated the division for a couple years. So if she's totally bought in to the idea of living as a fighter and being a fighter again and doing nothing but dedicating yourself to the craft, I think that she has the potential to beat Nunes. I think she has the potential to beat anybody except for maybe a skilled boxer like Holly Holm. Right. But I just don't see how you can kind of
Cyborg.
resign your and Cyborg. That would be a tall order. I just don't see how you could step away from things and kind of resign yourself to the possibility of not fighting again, and then really get that hunger in the pit of your stomach again. And so, we'll see what happens when Ronda really tastes another punch or a kick. If she still
go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, if she still she still feels like she can respond to the to the taste of blood in her mouth with the vigor required of a fighter, then I think that she has a chance to beat Amanda Nunes. If she does it, and if she turns into Brock Lesnar after taking a mean punch, then then it should be a short fight.
Right. I don't know, because it wasn't like Ronda got choked out or was like a fluke arm bar or something. Like, she got punished in that Holly Holmes fight. Her face got broken. It was almost like Holly broke her will and just like made her question herself, made her question if she wanted to be a fighter again. She was on the Ellen DeGeneres show talking about how she was suicidal. It's almost like, I don't know if like her psyche is really built for this. And I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not built to fight. I'm not going to ever fight in the UFC. Some people just aren't built for that type of war and attrition when you're kind of down in that water with people like that. So I don't know if she's really built for it. And I just feel like if I was coming back, I watch First Take a lot, and Stephen A. Smith and Max were talking about this a couple weeks ago. They were saying that maybe Amanda wasn't the best fight for Holly to get her feet wet again. Maybe she should have fought a cupcake, not Misha, but just like some sort of cream puff. Get your feet wet again. Get your legs under you. But instead, she goes right to the top of the division versus one of the baddest women on the planet. So I just don't know if this is the right fight for Ronda right now.
Oh, this would be the second or third worst fight for Ronda. She should have taken a tune-up fight.
Right.
Not only because of the beatdown, but because of the inactivity after the beatdown.
Absolutely. She couldn't fight. She was I think she was suspended by like the Las Vegas, Nevada Commission or something like that due to health reasons. She wasn't able to train because she spent time in the hospital, didn't she, a couple of days after the fight?
Oh yeah, she was really in pretty bad shape for I think close to a week after the fight, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So I just can't see this being the most I guess you would say the smartest fight to take from her camp, or she was I guess you would say she was the golden goose. She was the All-American sweetheart for the UFC. I can remember going to I watched a lot of UFC at Buffalo Wild Wings or Hooters. And it was nothing like going to see a Ronda Rousey fight or now a Conor McGregor fight. You can go watch some of the other numbered fights, and you can always kind of get your seat right around the time the main card starts on the pay-per-view. But if Ronda Rousey was fighting, like the last 3 or 4 fights, you'd have to be there like an hour in advance. It was almost like Mike Tyson of the year 2005 and 2006, the way people were clamoring to watch her fight. That night she got knocked out, it was amazing. Like, I'd never seen so many people just completely shocked. And these weren't necessarily UFC fans. These were people who were just taking a liking to Ronda, and they thought she was completely invincible. And then to her to just get destroyed the way she did, it was just like, I feel like people are still in shock for the way she went out.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest shocks I recall. I'm trying to think of anything that even comes close over the past several years. I mean, I'll switch to boxing. Maybe when Manny Pacquiao got knocked out in his 4th fight against Marquez,
and looked like he had died. Right, exactly.
Right, or maybe Anderson Silva when he got leaned by Chris Weidman the first time.
Right.
I mean, that was shocking. It wasn't as shocking as his leg falling to pieces in the second fight. But
that was horrible. It was like his leg exploded inside of his body. It was horrible.
Yeah, I think there was just a collective moment of silence after that one.
Man, and then he ended up coming back, but then it's been, questions with PEDs and all that sort of stuff. But I'm like you said, I'm glad the Spider just came back in general from that fight. But yeah, the card, like we said, the card, which is UFC 207, Friday, December 30th, should be a good one. Like you said, with Dominick Cruz fighting Cody Garbrandt along with Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey. So that should be a good card. And also TJ Dillashaw is on that card as well. But what about 208? That's on February 11th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. That's going to be the first inaugural fight for the Featherweight division. So there's been a lot of speculation, and there's been some chirping from Cyborg saying that she should have got a chance to fight in that fight. What are your thoughts on that, and who Dana and the new owners of the UFC decided to make fight for the new belt in that division?
So I think that until Cyborg gets beat by somebody in a mixed martial arts fight, she is the cream of the crop in terms of women's MMA.
Right.
To be honest, when Holly Holm lost her last fight, I was expecting her to announce her retirement.
Really?
Just because of how one-sided this fight looked, how much she looked a step behind her opponent for during that whole fight, and Holly Holm's a boxer, and she
Right.
lost to a striker, and the whole fight took place. Standing up.
Right.
So I thought that was supposed to be the fight where she was supposed to recover and kind of regain her bearings, but she just got outclassed. And then obviously the fight before that was the fight against Miesha Tate where she got put to sleep. So I mean, that's coming off of two pretty bad losses, and for you to go from that to getting a title shot in the new weight class, I think that was pretty much the UFC's attempt to throw some name recognition onto the card so that people would come around and watch it, and it would basically be the christening of this new, of this new weight class. Even though Cyborg is obviously a big name, I think you have some information in terms of why she didn't want to take that fight. But outside of Cyborg, Holly Holm would probably be the next big name in that weight region, right? Because there are no other big names that are that big, that are 145 or above.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I think Cyborg said she agreed to fight, but she just needed some more time. And I guess Dana and the new owners of the UFC, if you kind of look at what's been going on lately, they're not really waiting around for anyone. Nobody's going to stop this train as we know it. And you see that. Oh my goodness! I just drew a blank. I'll go back to that. But yeah, I think they weren't willing willing to sit around and wait for her to try to come back, because she said she had a brutal weight cut. And Holly Holm actually said she was going to fight Cyborg and they were going to fight at a catch weight. But I guess Dana and the new owners of the UFC had a totally different idea with that. But I think it's pretty much, I guess, not set in stone, but I think everybody understands that the winner of this fight, which is between Holly Holm and Germaine, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, it's Germaine is it Randamie? Randamie, yeah.
Maybe Randamie?
Something like that. The Iron Lady, yeah. The fight between Holly and Germaine, I think the winner of that will probably fight Cyborg in the next fight. But even with Conor McGregor, he said somebody's going to have to pry those belts away from him when he had the two weight classes. Well, that stopped quick. You saw he got stripped immediately, and somebody else fought for his belt. So I don't think the new owners of the UFC are in the game of waiting for people. They want their fights, they want them set, and they want to keep this train going because they paid a lot of money for the UFC, and they're not going to just be held hostage by fighters.
Yeah, and I do get that. However, I think that it would only be right for you to be given some fixed period of time, say a year or maybe 16 to 18 months to defend the title before you get stripped of the title. Even if you said it at a year, I'm saying that Conor McGregor put his body through, juggling weight classes, kind of going back and forth, fighting somebody at 170 and then coming back down to 155 and then winning a fight by knockout there. I just think that he's performed well enough to be able to earn and deserve both titles that he's holding or that he held. So, I get the business aspect of it to keep the gravy train rolling, but again, from a credibility standpoint, I just don't see how anybody could be fighting for titles that Conor McGregor that he earned.
Right. Right.
So because he's the featherweight champion, right?
Right.
And he's the
current lightweight champion as well.
Okay, but when he was fighting Nate Diaz, those were non-title fights. Those were just challenges in that weight class. But
correct.
2 weight classes below that he held. Okay, so he did get stripped because of inactivity for a fixed period of time then, yeah?
Correct. Yeah, so right now, as it stands on the UFC's website, the current featherweight champion is Jose Aldo, and the interim champion is Max Holloway. He's the champion because they stripped Conor of the interim title, and then Max just recently won the fight against Anthony Pettis when Pettis lost the fight, and he also missed weight. So he took 2 L's that night, basically. But yeah, as it stands, Conor McGregor is technically not ranked in the top 15 of the featherweight division, and he had the title, I guess you would say, 2 weeks ago. So currently he's the champion in the lightweight division. But do you think he's going to take that fight with Caleb?
With
Khabib, I'm sorry.
With
Nurmagomedov.
You know what? I mean, he kind of has to, right? I mean, if you're gonna compete in the sport, that's certainly the next man up. I mean, this guy's been blowing people away lately, and he's beaten some good fighters. He beat Michael Johnson, who Michael Johnson himself has beaten some good fighters. He beat Rafael Dos Anjos, who was the champion at one point, who I believe knocked out Nate Diaz and beat Showtime Pettis. He's beat Daryl Horcher, Pat Healy. I mean, I think he definitely deserves a title shot, and I'm not sure who wins that fight. I mean, the guy's 24-0, so right. I think Conor would have his hands full. Will he take the fight? Yeah, I think Conor will take the fight. I think Conor has a life. I mean,
that's one thing. I don't think Conor, like you said, I think that's one thing that Americans love about Conor. I guess you would say fight fans in general. He doesn't seem like he ducks anyone. He's willing to fight. He fights a lot. He fights up. He fights down. He does a lot to his body, and he fights at a frequent pace. And like you said, even when he got choked out by Nate, he got right back on his horse. You didn't hear anything from him for a while he was training for the next fight. And then once he won that fight, he was back to old Conor. He didn't tuck his tail and run. He got himself back together, and he said, I'll be back. And he did. And I think that's why people respect it. Because you would think after a loss like that, it would kind of die down. But like the Conor luster, I felt like it never took a step back. I think it's like he never went away, which is crazy because he got choked out.
Yeah, it would have been really easy to be discouraged after a fight like that and not want to see that guy in the cage again, as opposed to making that your very next fight. Like, no, I want you right back in here because I have business to handle. So
right.
It's one of those, don't let the flamboyance fool you, right? It seems like Conor is nothing but business. So I can definitely respect that. Right.
It'll be interesting, to like you said, to see if he's going to take that fight against Nurmagomedov. Or will he go back to the featherweight division because Jose said he wants his title shot again? Because remember, Jose said Dana promised him he would get a shot at Conor again after the last fight against Frankie Edgar, and he didn't. So that's why Jose is talking about completely walking away from the UFC because he says he doesn't want to keep fighting people like Max Holloway or Frankie Edgar or Ricardo Loomis. He feels like he wants to fight Conor again and avenge his loss. But I guess, like you said, it's all about dollars and cents at some point, and Conor gets to pick and choose who he fights because he's the man right now.
Yeah, he definitely gets to determine his fate, and I can certainly understand Jose Aldo wanting to get back in there with Conor. I mean, basically the first meaningful punch Conor threw in that fight put Jose Aldo to sleep. I don't think anybody expected that, and so that probably has been on his mind since. So if Conor does take a fight with Jose Aldo, so that would be a title fight, right? Because Max Holloway won the interim championship.
Yeah, so, I don't see. That's a good question because Max is technically the interim champion. Jose is technically the current champion. So if Conor even fought in the featherweight division, would he be technically a contender fighting one of the champions right now? That's so weird.
Yeah, I used to think that the interim champion was basically the same thing as a champion. Like if a champion gets suspended for 2 years, or if the champion.
That's how it was with John Jones when he got in trouble. He lost his belt, and they had an interim title fight between it was Rumble and who was it? It was Rumble and Cormier. Remember that? And then Cormier was the title. He ended up being the straight up champion.
Yeah, so in that case, the interim champion was the champion, as opposed to the Max Holloway situation, where it almost seems like the interim champion is almost a placeholder until we could get another fight for the real champion, Jose Aldo.
Right. Because the last, I guess you would say, like, interim title shot they had was Jose fought Frankie Edgar, I believe, at UFC 200, because that's when Conor didn't fight, because I think he ended up fighting Nate Diaz. It was weird, because I don't know that those two divisions are kind of like log jammed at the top, because Conor gets to pick and choose and fight when he wants to. But like we both said, you do what you want when you're popping. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just doubling back really quickly at the UFC 208 card. How do you think that they're going to actually sell that fight? And do you think that is going to be the final fight card, or do you think there's still work to be done to bolster the fight card?
There has to be work to be done. I feel like somebody, like you said, somebody from the top of these divisions is going to fight, because the top of the card, like we said, is Holly Holmes versus Germaine for the new featherweight title shot. And I can't see that being your headline of the card, because this is Brooklyn, New York. They want to see some of your top fighters. Brooklyn wants to see like headliners. So all you have is Holly Holm and Teixeira and, Brown. I can't see it. Like it's not even a full card yet. So I think it's definitely good. They're definitely going to have to bolster that fight with somebody who maybe somebody who fought recently, but they didn't take a lot of damage. Maybe Tyron Woodley, or even Conor McGregor. He'd probably be willing to fight in February, depending on who's out there. So don't be surprised if the Conor McGregor fight ends up coming, like you said, with the Conor and Caleb, if they fight in February. Or even maybe if we see another heavyweight fight with Miocic, I guess Fabricio Verdum as the number one contender right now. So, or even DC. If DC is healthy, he might fight Rumble, because remember, DC was hurt the last time they were supposed to have their rematch. So the heavyweight division is so kind of, it's not heavyweight, I'm sorry, the light heavyweight with Rumble being, not with Rumble being out, the light heavyweight is kind of up in the air with John Jones being out. Like, I just see two people, and then it's just a bunch of like fill in the blank. I see Cormier, Anthony Johnson, and then it's like, who do you want to put after them? Because I don't think any of those guys can beat either one of them, because obviously with DC and his wrestling ability, and then Rumble with his bricks that he throws. So I can't see anybody beating those two. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, who else they put on that 208 card to bolster it. Who do you think? Who would you like to see on that 208 card?
I would like to see heavyweight action, but they've already scheduled the Fabricio Verdum Cain Velasquez rematch for the Nunes Rousey 207 card. So Cain is going to have a chance to avenge his loss, where he lost the title versus Verdum. Right. And then I'm assuming that the winner of that is going to fight Stipe Miocic, right?
Right. At maybe like 209.
Maybe I think maybe they could get that on in 209, maybe even 210, because sometimes they pile the cards pretty quickly, right? Like sometimes it'll be like one a month, and sometimes they'll even have two UFCs in 1 month. So it could be 210, 210. Perhaps. Yeah. The fight that I would like to see on that card would actually take place in the middleweight division, and that would be between champion Michael Bisping and Yoel Romero, the one who just need Chris Weidman's head through the upright. Gotcha.
Okay. That dude is an old dude, and he's like real religious, and he's like some of his post-fight interviews are really odd and like strange, but they're great to listen to. But yeah, he definitely has bricks. And speaking of Luke Rockhold, like what happened to him? I think he took Bisping too light, and then he just kind of fell off the wagon.
Yeah, I think that was totally it. I just think that he underestimated Bisping, because I mean, let's be honest, I still can't believe Bisping is actually a champion.
Right, and he's defended it.
Yeah, he's defended it against a geriatric Dan Henderson. I mean,
right.
You've seen the highlight when Dan Henderson first fought Bisping. This was several years ago,
right.
maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, where Dan Henderson laid a right hand on Bisping that was one of the most devastating knockouts you'll ever see.
Right.
And one of those where they could take the smelling salt and they could have given him a 10 count, a 20 count. He wasn't getting up anytime soon.
Right.
So seeing somebody go from that to beating Anderson Silva, I mean, Bisping's picking a hell of a time to be champion. I mean, Dan Henderson it just happens to be, 50 years old.
Right.
Anderson Silva is, a spider's supposed to have eight legs. I'm convinced that this spider has 7 legs, maybe 6 legs.
Right.
So I think with Bisping being champion, it's all timing, and I do think that if Luke Rockhold had a rematch against Bisping, that he would handle business and regain the title.
Right. Yeah, I think that, like you said, that would be a good rematch. And even Chris Weidman, he's been taking some punishment in his last couple fights. He hasn't looked like he used to look when he was beaten up on the Spider. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, like you said, if they pull somebody from that middleweight title. But like you said, I guess you would say Bisping avenged that loss. But like you said, he beat up an old man, so it wasn't the same. And I will say he took some shots in that fight, though. Bisping could have went to sleep, but I was so shocked that he was able to withstand that pounding that Dan Henderson was putting on him. Because like you said, he's got that old man strength, that one-punch power, and he was literally doing all he could to knock him out. But Bisping, he just kept taking the pounding, and he just refused to go out that fight.
Yeah, it seemed like anytime Bisping got touched, by Henderson, he would, he got set on his wallet. But
right.
It just doesn't seem like Henderson had enough energy in the enough gas in the tank to really have a sustained attack. It looked like he was just trying to load up and set up just that one right hand to change everything. And Bisping, he would get put on his feet, and then he would back up, scoot back on his butt, and then get back up, and then start circling again and outboxing Dan Henderson. But Bisping, I just don't see him being champion for very long. I just don't think that he's I think he's a good fighter. I don't think he's by any means a great fighter. I don't think he's one of the most talented people in the division. I think he's got really good work ethic, and I think that he's improved on his game. But again, if you were to give me Chris Weidman right now or Bisping, I'd say Chris Weidman. I'd say Chris Weidman straight out the hospital after fighting Yoel Romero against Michael Bisping.
Yeah. Like you said, I think it's timing too. I think he's currently champion when the division is kind of like in limbo. They don't have a lot of top fighters that are really throwing bricks and really making a splash in terms of headline events. So I think he's a champion at a perfect time for his career, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I if I had to bet on it, I would really think that his next title defense is going to be his last, at least as champion this go round. Even Vitor Belfort. Granted, Vitor Belfort has apparently been juicing for the last 10 years or however long. But Vitor Belfort kicked Luke Rockhold and Michael Bisping's heads off. And so, again, Vitor Belfort, when I say that Michael Bisping isn't the most talented, that's because, we've seen talented fighters in the division. We've seen Anderson Silva. We've seen Vitor Belfort, people who just have either an out-of-this-world athleticism or just, in the case of Anderson Silva, just a striking that was never before seen in the sport. So,
right.
I do think that the division's in flux, and I think that a lot of the older blood is kind of exiting the game right now, and I think that it's going to take a new generation to really reinvigorate that division.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to stay tuned because, like we said, we have UFC 207 coming up. That's on Friday, December 30th, 2006. So we're going to pay close attention to that card. I'm sure we'll have a post-fight recap with Ronda's return to the ring, as well as Dominick, Cruz, and Cody getting a chance to settle it for once and for all. So the pre-fight's going to be on FS1, and of course the main card starts at 10 p.m. Eastern. And again, that's UFC 207 on Friday, December 30th. So again, Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, with my friend Stan Tucker. He's a boxing and UFC expert, so we will do what we do, and we'll be back. Thanks for listening, y'all. Take care.